and welcome to My Counselor Live. My name is Brittany East, and joining us today is Peter Muwati to share his insight about how to bring maybe a little more happiness or satisfaction into our marriages. Before we jump into this compelling topic, Peter, can you share a little bit about yourself for the audience members who may not know you yet?
Sure, Brittany. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm one of the counselors at MyCounselor.Online, and I joined this awesome team actually this year from my own private practice. And I'm married now for 8 years and have 2 beautiful kids. And I absolutely love my work at MCO, seeing individuals and couples. And on the couples front, I'm also a certified emotionally focused couple therapist. And, it's one of the main scientific and research-based approaches we use to serve our couples here at MCO.
Well, that's awesome, Peter, and I'm grateful to have your insight and expertise today. So you wrote your article that's titled 4 Ways to Become Emotionally Available in Your Marriage. So what inspired you to write this article?
I love couples work. And it hurts for me to see couples in distress or having conflict, when oftentimes the problem is that they're not tuning into or being comfortable with being vulnerable yet, right? And they're not finding that space to connect within the emotional channel with their spouse. So this was an opportunity to share a little bit about that, right? Because emotions get a bad rap at times, and yet they're the stuff that's for connection, and it's the way that God has given us to connect to one another.
No, that's so true. So when you wrote your article, was it just for married couples? Did you have like married couples in a certain stage of life, or what was your audience you were thinking of?
Great question. I mean, the way that I was seeing it was it's written for anyone that wants to have a closer and intimate communication and relationship. So it's anyone who wants to love fully, right? It's not only for couples in distress, but also for premarital couples and for married couples who are doing okay, but are just looking for more intimacy and for more connection.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I can relate to that. So you titled it 4 Ways to Become Emotionally Available. Can you just briefly describe, like, what does it mean to even be emotionally available to your spouse?
Yeah, so when we're emotionally available, we are fully present to ourselves and to our spouse's experiences, right? So God made us emotional beings, right? To be emotionally healthy, we have to be able to welcome this gift from our Creator and to be able to use emotions for their intended purpose. So in marriage, emotions are how we can tell and show each other what we need at a really deep level. And when we express our fears, our hurts, our pains, our joys, right? And by design by the Creator, we end up not having to face these things on our own, right? We can pull our spouse close for support and find some comfort, some relief, and even some peace and acceptance.
I really like the idea of like viewing emotions as a gift, because like sometimes like, are my emotions a gift? I don't know.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and it seems like it's important in your marriage, for, like you talked about, like that connection. Like it's hard to, if God made us emotional beings, and if you're not in touch with your emotions, like how can you connect with other people? So there is, in your article, you said there are 4 ways to actually like signal that we're emotionally available. Do you mind like running through those and giving examples?
Yeah, I'd love to do that, Brittany. So the first one really is the body, our bodies, right? And our body language. Am I signaling to my spouse that I'm willing to listen, I'm open, I'm available, right? And sometimes we can give off a signal that I'm not, right? When we walk away from our spouse while we're having a meaningful conversation. That's really closing them out, right? And closing us off from being emotionally available. The second way is to use validation, right? And this is really about believing our spouse, right? When they are going through something, and then being there for them in whatever they're going through, right?
Mhm.
And then the third thing is being able to stay attuned. So remember I said that we're emotional beings and the creator made us this way. So we have this ability to stay attuned to the needs of our beloved.
Mhm.
So again, we can be there for them. And then finally, learning to become comfortable with emotion, right? Staying with it even if it's hard, and doing so for the sake of our spouse. So those are the four things that really, for me, make up emotional availability.
No, that makes sense. I really like how you break down, because it's crazy to think that, we think emotions is just like, oh, it's just how I'm feeling, can just talk about it, but just how we can communicate them in so many different ways, with our bodies, with our presence, with everything. I really liked how you broke down even more within your article, when the audience can read it, just what people can see. One of the things that did strike me was about the validation part. You really highlighted believing your spouse's emotional experience. I know for me, sometimes that can feel difficult, because it's like, well, what if I feel like their emotional experience doesn't make sense, or it feels untrue, or things like that? So I don't know, are you able to explain maybe how someone could validate, how do you validate a spouse's emotional experience? Maybe you don't agree with it, or to bring connection?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? And what comes to mind is that a lot of things happen in life: work, friends, and family, right? And some of these things can have a component that's unpleasant, right? So a difficult work colleague, right? A friendship that goes bad, or a family we struggle to get along with. So rather than dismissing the emotional feeling part of your spouse's bad experience, right, and sort of asking them to push it aside, or not acknowledging it. Validation really looks like empathizing. It looks like listening. It looks like understanding, and it looks like believing, all packed into one, right? So if your spouse has had a bad relationship, for example, with a close family member, validation looks like listening to that pain and hurt, and in that situation, like offering to be there for them, right? That's really what it looks like for them, because it's we don't all experience things the same way. So something that might be easy for me might be difficult for somebody else. So believing one another is important in that way. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. So if there is a couple though, and one person's really comfortable with their emotions and the person's uncomfortable, how are ways to help the uncomfortable spouse get more comfortable? Is there any practical things they can do, or?
Yeah, I always like to think that at some point there's no way around taking the tiny risk of sharing our vulnerable emotions and learning to become comfortable with that, right? So ideally in a marriage, these are two people who care for each other.
Yeah.
So for for the spouse who is uncomfortable with emotions, gently leading them to be able to share their inner world, and creating a situation where when they do that, the other spouse who is more comfortable with emotion is really welcoming of their inner world, right? And really shows that they're interested, and that they accept the other spouse's inner world. And so it's really about having success in being vulnerable, right? That I can be successful at it rather than being a failure, which for a lot of people might have been an experience growing up, that
Yeah.
when I'm vulnerable, when I cry, when I express sadness or fear, it's not welcome,
Yeah.
right? And it's not welcome, which makes it feel like I'm not welcome, right? So marriage is an opportunity to have a different experience and to become a more whole person, and to integrate that part of us that God made, that emotional part, and become a thinking, feeling human being.
Yeah, I really like just like your sentiment of just letting marriages be a safe place where like not necessarily we can just say whatever we want, but like we can be validating and accepting of like emotional experiences and just kind of creating new stories for people to like kind of rewire their brains and accept and like grow together. So that's really beautiful. I really appreciate your insight into that. Do you have any like final pieces of advice for anyone watching this?
Yeah, Brittany, I think there's so much joy and peace in learning how to communicate our vulnerable emotions and also practicing being there in our spouse's vulnerable emotions. So staying with them.
Yeah.
And a large part of the antidote to common arguments, right? Being there for one another emotionally so that neither of you feels alone, feels unsupported or unimportant. That really tends to cover a lot of the pain that leads to or ends up coming from common arguments.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, of course. When we feel alone, we're more likely to, everything feels harder for
Yeah.
absolutely. So, well, Peter, thank you so much for sitting down with me, sharing your insights, sharing your heart. Really, I definitely felt that communicate just how much you do love couples, how much like you just want them to succeed and feel safe and feel like, and really like because of God, like how he's formed us and knitted us and like wants people to relate just his vision for what marriage could be. If we just accept these God-given emotions in
Right.
our lives. And
Right.
thank you so much for watching and listening today. We are so grateful for your support. We love just getting to share like our experiences with you and like the professional insight of our counselors. If you like to subscribe to our channel to view out more videos, you can follow us on social media. On Facebook, you can search for Love My Counselor. On Instagram, our handle is Love My Counselor. And on YouTube, you can search MyCounselor.Online Christian Counseling. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week for another episode of My Counselor Live.